deeper dive on our Tuesday 2x2. I'm Karen Walker, and I'm an executive coach and consultant, speaker, author. I often think in 2x2s, and so I've created short videos to help explain some of that thinking to you. If you followed me here from our 2-minute 2x2 sessions, thank you again for following from LinkedIn and from Instagram. So just a couple of moments to review what a 2x2 is and then dive into today's topic. I'm hoping this will be super conversational, so please send chat messages with questions or comments. I have a few questions here that people have sent me in advance, which I'll do my best to answer. And again, like to make this interactive and as conversational as possible. So first, a 2x2, just a quick review, is simply a 4-quadrant diagram. It takes 2 concepts and puts them in opposition, and then 4 quadrants fall out of that. It's a simple and pretty effective way to sort of cut through the noise and look at the relationships between 2 concepts. Often, not always, that upper right quadrant for the 2x2 is the optimum spot, right? It's sort of the high in the hive, whatever you're looking at. It's what Gardner Research calls the magic quadrant. So this week, I'm going to look at a 2x2 that I think is particularly useful for our time. This is being filmed during sort of the midst of our COVID-19 pandemic. And the 2 opposing forces we'll look at this week are time to think and energy level. So time to think is just that. It is carving out time for yourself to think the big thoughts, to look at the picture. It is a very important part of every leader's job. In fact, I would say for almost everyone, it's a super important part of your job. You're not a robot. You're not just paid to do things mindlessly, but to think about what you're doing. And the more time you can carve out for yourself to look at the big picture and think about why you're doing something, what's the context, the better you'll be able to do the 10,000 things of your daily life sort of in the right direction, we call directionally correct. So this second one, we have time to think, and we have energy level. So energy level is simply that. It is the energy that you bring to this time, whatever that is. If you are low energy, you'll be on the left-hand side of the 2x2. If you are high energy and bouncing off the walls, you will be on the right-hand side of this 2x2. So let's have sort of a deeper dive now into the very specific quadrants that this creates. So the first of these quadrants would be the lower left-hand side. And this is what I call the hamster wheel, right? So you have a low energy and you have a low time to think or no time to think. So it's sort of down on both of the forces we're looking at. So when you're in the hamster wheel space, you have no direction and little to no progress, right? It's just one foot in front of the other. And for me, it's those days when I look up at the end and say, exactly what did I accomplish today? I know I was busy. I know that I did things, but I'm not sure that I accomplished anything. When I think about what this looks like for other people, I have had similar conversations with friends, but one of the questions that I got was, so what do I do if I find myself in this space? If I find myself on the hamster wheel, what's the right thing to do? And I think there are 2 answers to that. One is if there's something that needs doing, that is that sort of mindless task, great. Just know that that's where you are and that's what you're doing. And maybe it's a good use of a low energy time and something you just need to check off the list. And so that's great. Just, sort of keep those wheels moving. For me, that's like prepping my taxes for the tax accountant, right? It's not something I enjoy. It's got to be done. It's not something that contributes to me strategically, but I just put my head down and sort of get her done and get through it on that wheel. The other thing, if you find yourself in this space and you're not doing a task that needs to be done in this mindset, is to do something else. Oftentimes, we'll find ourselves sort of just staring at the screen or starting and stopping something and sort of not really making progress on a task that needs progress. And in that case, sometimes it's best just to leave what you're doing, take a break, go for a walk outside, read something, do something that sort of changes your energy state a bit. And then when you come back, see if you can approach the task from one of these other areas on the 2x2 that we're looking at. So we're going to move now to the second quadrant. Let me just see first if there are any additional questions. Nope, thumbs up, thank you. But we'll save our questions for later, I suppose. So the next quadrant I want to look at is the upper right quadrant. And this is something that I call the tactical space, right? This is where we have sort of low time to think, but high energy. So what does that look like? That looks like I'm really busy. I have a lot of adrenaline going. I'm sort of flitting from task to task. In my life, it looks like going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting all day, right? So my energy level could be super high. In fact, I can sort of get pumped up from the adrenaline of all those different things that are going on. But I'm not having the space or the time to think the big thoughts. It's just about, sort of focusing on what I need to do in that hour or that 45 minutes and doing that. And I find myself, I can make improvement here, but the improvement comes like 1, 2, 3 steps at a time. One of the pre-questions that I got about this is, what kind of a meeting would be sort of a more tactical meeting where you could make some progress. And I would say for me, that is most meetings, because we have an agenda, we have a thing that we need to do that it sort of advances towards the goal and the progress we're trying to make. A super example of sort of blocked out tactical time would be a QBR, quarterly business review, right? You're often sort of looking back at data, you're doing the projections in the future, and then you're talking about sort of what are the incremental steps. But this is not the time and space where you're going to make the big leaps about sort of what's our new strategy going to be. It's just tactical. All right, the next area I want to look at would be the lower right-hand quadrant. So this is an area where you would have sort of lots of time to think, but very little energy. And I call this the land of sort of lost opportunities, because with all this time to think, I can generate some pretty amazing ideas. This is a place where it's pretty easy for me to fool myself about the progress that I'm making. One of the areas that happens, one of the places where this most often happens for me is if I'm on an airplane. I always think I have this time and I'm going to get a lot done, but then by the time I get to the airport, I get on the plane, I get into the space, we go up, and then finally you can sort of zip out the laptop and do something. I have this block of time, but my energy is just not what I want it to be, right? And so I used to not make very good use of this time, but what I've found is that I can use this time to ideate. It's a great time for me to make lists of possibilities of things that could happen, lots of good things that I might want to do. The trick is, if you're going to be in this space, know that you're here and know that without some higher energy or some discipline and accountability around your schedule, you're going to leave a lot, if not all of those good ideas on the table. I mean, how many of us have gone to conferences or, listened to talks or even read, great books? And we're like, oh, wow, I could do A, B, C, and D, and those would all be awesome. And then you get back and you get back to your desk or your computer and you open it up and you get back to all the things that were there before you left, plus more things that came in while you were gone. And you don't get the new ideas done. So you have to have the discipline when you're in the lost opportunity space. Do the ideation. That's great during this time to think, but put time on your calendar so that you can do something with those good ideas, right? Otherwise, they actually will be lost opportunities. So another check for questions around here. Yeah. So absolutely. What happens here for many people, myself included, is distraction, right? I may get started on a good idea even because I have this time to think. And so I'm sort of fleshing out the idea, what might happen, and then I get a distraction. Do I get back to the good idea? Rarely. Did I take it to fulfillment? Rarely, because I get pulled off by this, that, or the other. I know one of the ways you can deal with that would be, little things like the Pomodoro technique. For those of you that haven't tried it, so Pomodoro is a little tomato, right? So started by a guy in Italy. There's an app for it if you want, but it's basically just blocking off a 20-minute or so chunk of time where you will not be disturbed. You either close the laptop lid or turn off notifications, close your email, close your door if you have one, but really focus for this small period of time on making sure that you can finish the task. You've set out a 20-minute task, make sure that you can focus and not have distractions. And that's a way, if you're in this sort of high time to think, low energy state, that you can get through. All right, so the last of our quadrants. So we've talked about the hamster wheel, we've talked about being tactical, we've talked about lost opportunities. Now in the upper right-hand corner, which in this case is the sort of the breakthrough spot, this is where we have high time to think, lots of time to think, and we have a high energy level, right? So this is like the ideal state for many of us. We can't always spend as much time here as we'd like, but the payoff is really big. So this is where you have both insights and follow through action, and that will lead to the step function improvement that you expect from a breakthrough, right? So unlike tactical, where you're just able to get 1 or 2 steps ahead, in this space, when you have the energy, you're really able to take it to the next level. So a couple of things I would say about that. I first stumbled on this for myself. I was a vice president at a Fortune 100 company, and just busy 24/7, as I'm sure many of us are. And I kept trying to think about what do I want to do next with my career? What do I want to do next with my life? And I found it impossible to answer this question because I was so busy. I could not get beyond the tactical. And I tried a lot of different things. But I was so sort of burnt out. My energy level was so low that the things that I tried, I'd say the things that were most impactful ended up being big chunks of time. So like I checked myself into a quiet place, actually a monastery outside of Houston, for a couple of days. And it was just me and some books and pen and paper. And I was really able to devote some time to clearing my mind and thinking about sort of what are these big questions I want to answer. I ended up leaving that job and taking some dedicated time, sort of a self-paid sabbatical, where I explored a lot of those ideas. And I was fortunate to be able to do that, and that's what led to my consulting career. But it really does take a high energy level. You can't force yourself into this kind of space. It's sort of Aristotle and the bathtub story, right? Where he lowered himself into the water. He'd been thinking about this problem of the volume of objects, and he had his aha moment, right? It was a time when he had time to think, and he also had a pretty good energy level. So another thing to say about this particular area is that you need to use it for important things, right? It's sort of like what should I use in each quadrant? Well, this is for the big important stuff. This is for strategy. This is unlike a QBR. This would be a space where a strategy retreat that is well done, not just one presentation after the other, but some actual thought about sort of breaking into brainstorming and thinking big would be useful. I was asked what's a tool that you could use here once you're in this space. I love Thomas Wedelberg's new book called What is Your Problem? Right? It's all about both ideation and then what to do with the ideation. I'll put a link to that in the comments below, but that's a tool that I could recommend for you in this space. But the big thing for me around this breakthrough space and how to get there and stay there is to take control of your calendar. Oh, great. Here's another question. The question is, I really do, but I can't seem to keep the time, right? So, first recognize where you are, right? I'm not able to be in the space I want to be in, and to recognize in yourself that it's important. If you don't think something's important, you will not change your behaviors. You have to have some internal motivation for why you want to do something different. And if you can recognize the importance of strategic thinking, of thinking big thoughts, that'll help you reinforce your new behaviors. And then you have to put some discipline and accountability around it, right? Plan for making time for this, make time for it, and then debrief and learn. Look back on, how did that go? How did I use that time? How did that work for me? What worked and what could I do better next time? And then schedule your next session. So this is the time for big picture thinking, and again, making sure that you can take control of your calendar. So one of the questions that came in that I thought was interesting had to do with calendaring. Like, I want to be big picture, but I end up getting dragged back into the tactical because I have all these meetings scheduled. So I would say look at and see what are you actually spending your time on. I found a particularly useful tool from a woman named Laura Vanderkam. Again, I'll put this in the show notes. She has a book called 168 Hours, and she has a really good sort of short TED Talk if you're not up for a whole book. And what she suggests, and I actually did this a couple of months ago, is tracking your time for 2 weeks. Because what I think I'm spending my time on and what I am spending my time on are often not the same thing. I have a general idea, but there's a lot of time where I think I'm spending sort of in the sort of more important, more impactful areas. But I'm sort of whittling away on things that are more hamster wheelish and don't really need to be there. So I found that to be really important. All right, I'm going to go to a couple of other questions here that I got. So one is, thank you, Alan, for this. How do we determine which project ideas are not in the right quadrant? So not just where are we spending our time, but what project ideas are not there and that they need to be moved and why? Should this apply to high priority ideas? Is there a corresponding tool to help with the prioritization associated with the 2x2? So I'd say, first of all, sort of look at the projects you are spending your time on. And then, I'm a big fan, those of you that know me, of the important versus urgent 2x2. Where are the projects? Do you have projects that are not important, not urgent, or both, that you are spending time on? And if so, you have to take them out of the queue and just be able to say no to projects. And then to look at the things that are urgent and important but not urgent. And those are the projects that you want to make sure that you are scheduling and that you are scheduling when you have high energy and you're able to do that. There's another great concept called the corporate athlete. I think this was Tony Schwartz and Jim Lair that wrote an article called The Corporate Athlete that I'm a big fan of. And the basic concept is just this, that when you are an athlete, let's say you're a tennis pro, you go from tournament to tournament to tournament, but you have a season, right? So you get up for the French Open, a little recovery period, you get up for another Open, a little recovery period, up for the US Open, whatever. Then you have an off season where you sort of recover and retrain right before the next season. Well, for those of us that work in the corporate world, we don't have an off season, right? You might get a little break at the holidays, or maybe we have short vacations, but we are, by and large, sort of expected to be on all the time. Well, that's just not possible. So to pay attention to the rhythms in your calendar, right? When do you most need to be sort of on and in peak? And when can you have some recovery time? Make sure that you get that into your calendar as well. Second question here from Alan was, for high priority projects that should be in the top right, what tools can we leverage to move them? So again, I would just mention both your calendar, but also a tool like Thomas Wettleberg's new book, What's Your Problem? Just a big fan of having frameworks for these things. And Thomas is a big thinker, sort of like the Kellys from IDEO. It's just a really good tool and book that you can use. So let me just see if there's another question that's come in. We'll have just a quick look here. And a reminder that I would love for you to share this video if you get value out of it, and to continue to ask questions and make comments in the comment section here, or on the LinkedIn space where this video will be posted. And I will do my best to respond to your questions as quickly as possible. If you want more information about 2x2s and other applications, of course, you can sign up for my newsletter, which you can find at my website, which is karenwalker.us. So www.karenwalker.us. The other thing is on social media, of course, you can find me at Karen Walker US. That's on all the social media platforms. I really appreciate you being here today. I think the big takeaways, if I were going to summarize for you, one is know where you are. It's most important to know where you are on these quadrants. Make sure you're doing a task that's appropriate to that space. If you're not, either change your energy level. I'm reminded Tony Robbins was famous. I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but for taking like a deep cold plunge in a pool of water to change his energy state. Well, that's not going to happen for most of us, but we can take walks, change our environment, do a different task. So either change the task, change your energy level. So do the right task for the box that you're in, or change the box by changing energy level. And lastly, you can change your ability to have the time to think by taking back control of your calendar. Take good care. Thanks.